I still remember the sound of the kettle that morning. Strange how life can break apart during the most ordinary moments. The water was beginning to boil, humming softly from the stove, while rain tapped against my kitchen window. Tiny drops rolled down the glass like quiet tears racing each other to the bottom. I stood there in my old cream-colored sweater, waiting for tea, thinking about whether I should buy more sugar next week. At 72 years old, my life had become small. Small, but peaceful. And I had learned to appreciate small things. The warmth of sunlight on my chair near the window. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street. The laughter of my grandchildren during the holidays. The sound of birds arriving every morning in the garden Daniel built with me years ago. I was Margaret, an old woman, a mother, a grandmother. I lived alone in the house where I had spent nearly 40 years of my life. The same house where I brought my son home after he was born. The same walls that carried echoes of birthdays, school mornings, and Christmas songs. Every corner held a memory. Near the stairs, there was a tiny mark on the wall where Daniel had crashed his toy bicycle when he was 7. In the living room, there was still a faint stain on the carpet from spilled grape juice on his 10th birthday. And above the fireplace sat our family photographs. I looked at them every morning, my husband smiling beside me, Daniel as a little boy with missing front teeth, my grandchildren laughing at the beach. Some people call them old pictures. I called them pieces of my heart. My husband had passed away 11 years earlier. Cancer. Even now, I sometimes reached for the other side of the bed during the night and felt surprised by emptiness. Funny, isn't it? Love stays, even after people leave. I poured tea into my favorite cup and sat down beside the window. I remember smiling. Daniel's wedding was tomorrow. My son was finally getting married. I had spent months helping him whenever he needed me. Small things, helping with deposits, paying for flowers when expenses became difficult, sending money quietly when he said things were a little tight. I never asked too many questions. Mothers often don't. We tell ourselves we're helping. We tell ourselves love means giving. I had always trusted Daniel. Always. Maybe because I remembered him as the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. Maybe because mothers sometimes continue seeing children long after they become adults. My phone vibrated on the table. I looked down casually. A message from the bank. I smiled to myself. Probably another promotion. Maybe another reminder about account statements. I picked up my cup with one hand and opened the message with the other. Then the cup slipped from my fingers. It shattered across the kitchen floor. Tea spread slowly over the tiles. I stared at my phone. Account balance. $0. For a few seconds, I simply looked at it. My mind refused to understand. No, that couldn't be right. I adjusted my glasses, then checked again and again. My breathing became shallow. I opened my banking history. The color slowly drained from my face. Transfer completed. Withdrawal completed. Transfer completed. Everything. Savings, retirement money, emergency funds. 40 years of careful living. 40 years of saying no to myself. 40 years of maybe next year. Gone. Suddenly the room felt very quiet. Too quiet. Even the rain seemed to disappear. Then my phone started ringing, and when I saw Daniel's name on the screen, I felt something inside me begin to tremble. My hand trembled before I answered the phone. Daniel? For a second, I heard movement in the background. Music, voices, laughter, wedding preparations. Then his voice came. Mom, my wedding is tomorrow. I smiled automatically. Strange how mothers do that, even with fear sitting in their chest. Oh, sweetheart, I said softly. I was just thinking about you. There was a short silence. Not long, just long enough for something inside me to feel uneasy. Then he spoke again. I withdrew all the money from your account and sold the house. My heart stopped. I waited. I truly waited. I thought perhaps another sentence would follow. Something like, Mom, I'm joking. Mom, I had no choice. Mom, let me explain. But instead he said, Good luck. Then the call ended. I stared at the phone. The world around me continued moving. The rain still fell outside. The kettle was still making noise. Cars still passed along the street. Everything was normal, except me. I sat there for a very long time. I do not know how long. Minutes? Hours. Pain changes time. I looked at the broken cup on the floor. Tea had spread beneath the table. Tiny pieces of porcelain reflected the gray morning light. I suddenly remembered Daniel at 6 years old. He had dropped one of my favorite dishes while helping me set the table. He looked terrified. His little eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mommy," he had whispered. Then he hugged my waist and cried harder than I did. I remembered kneeling beside him. "It's okay," I told him. "It's only a plate." Back then, his heart was gentle. Back then, losing things mattered to him. A quiet pain moved through my chest. Not because of the money, not even because of the house. People think betrayal begins the moment truth arrives, but it doesn't. Betrayal begins when memories suddenly change their meaning. I stood slowly and cleaned the floor, one small piece at a time. I don't know why. Maybe because old women continue doing ordinary things even when life is falling apart. I threw away the broken pieces. Then I walked through the house. My house. Maybe not mine anymore. I touched the kitchen counter, the old wooden stairs, the walls, the photographs. My fingers rested on a picture of Daniel and me from years ago. He was 23. We were sitting in the garden, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing. On the back of the picture he had written, "To Mom, thank you for always believing in me." My eyes burned. For the first time that morning, tears came. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, one after another. The kind of tears that old people cry when nobody is watching. I sat beside the window and cried for the son I thought I knew. Because grief is strange. Sometimes people do not die, but you still lose them. After a while, I wiped my face. I looked outside. The rain had become lighter now. The clouds were beginning to separate. And suddenly, I heard my husband's voice inside my memory. Not really speaking, just remembering him. He used to tell me, "Margaret, kindness is beautiful, but kindness without boundaries becomes permission." I never understood that sentence before. Not completely. I picked up my phone. My fingers moved slowly through my contacts. Then I pressed one number. I listened to it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a calm voice answered. "Hello?" I closed my eyes and quietly said, "I think I need help." That was all. Just one phone call. Then I placed the phone back down and sat silently beside the window while the rain finally stopped. The next morning arrived carrying sunlight. Funny how the world continues moving even after your heart feels shattered. Golden light slipped through my curtains and rested gently on the bedroom floor. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling for a moment. For years, wedding mornings had always felt joyful to me. I remembered helping friends with flowers, choosing dresses, watching nervous brides wipe tears from their eyes. Wedding days meant beginnings, hope, love. But that morning felt different. I sat slowly at the edge of my bed and looked at the empty room around me. My husband used to say that difficult days reveal a person's true character, not because they change us, because they uncover us. I walked toward my closet and touched several dresses before stopping at a simple blue one. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. Daniel always liked blue. When he was a little boy, he used to call it sky color. I smiled sadly at the memory. I got dressed carefully and brushed my silver hair in front of the mirror. The face staring back at me looked older than I remembered. Not because of wrinkles, not because of age. Pain adds years quietly. Still, I looked into my own eyes and said softly, "You will walk in with dignity. No tears, no scene, no anger, just dignity." The wedding venue stood outside the city near a small lake. White flowers lined the entrance. Soft piano music floated through the air. Guests laughed and talked while servers carried trays of drinks through the crowd. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked perfect. I stood there for a moment, observing people. No one could see the storm inside me. No one knew that yesterday morning I had lost nearly everything. No one knew that a son had spoken to his mother as if she were simply an obstacle to move aside. Sometimes pain sits quietly in crowded rooms. Daniel saw me first. I noticed surprise flash across his face, then relief, then something else, something heavier. Guilt. He quickly walked toward me. Mom. His smile looked uncertain. You came. I looked at him, really looked at him. His suit fit perfectly. His hair was neatly combed. He looked handsome. For one painful second, I saw my little boy again. I saw scraped knees, school backpacks, birthday cakes, tiny hands reaching for mine. Then reality returned. I smiled gently. Of course I came. His eyes searched my face. People often do that when they know they have caused pain. They look for anger because anger feels easier to face than silence. But I gave him neither. I simply looked at him calmly. He shifted uncomfortably. You look nice. Thank you. Awkward silence settled between us. Then his bride, Emily, walked over. She hugged me warmly. Oh, Margaret, I'm so happy you're here. I hugged her back. And suddenly I noticed something. Her smile looked tired, not unhappy, worried. She glanced at Daniel very quickly, then looked away. A tiny moment, easy to miss. But age teaches you something valuable. People speak long before words do. The ceremony began. Guests took their seats. Music filled the air. Daniel stood near the altar waiting. Everyone smiled. Everyone watched. But Daniel kept reaching for his phone. Once, twice, 3 times. At first I thought nothing of it. Then I saw him reading messages under his chair. Then another message arrived. His forehead tightened. A few minutes later, his phone rang. He stepped outside. When he returned, the color in his face had changed. His smile looked forced now. Emily whispered something. Daniel shook his head quickly. Then another call came. And another. I watched silently. No anger, no satisfaction. Only observation. Because time has a quiet way of uncovering truths that emotions try to hide. And I had learned something yesterday. Silence can sometimes reveal more than questions ever will. Daniel stood a few feet away from me, holding his phone with shaking hands. Around us, the wedding continued moving as if nothing had happened. Guests laughed softly at tables, glasses touched, music floated through the room, but I could see it in his eyes. Fear, confusion, and beneath all of that, understanding. Mom, he said quietly. For the first time in a very long time, he sounded like my son again. Not confident, not rushed, not demanding, just lost. I looked at him calmly. The house sale. He swallowed hard. It didn't go through. I said nothing. The money transfer. His voice became smaller. Everything was frozen. His eyes slowly lifted to mine. The phone call. I simply nodded. The lawyer I called yesterday had helped me place immediate legal protections on the account and the property after noticing irregular activity. Years ago, after my husband passed away, he had insisted that I keep certain safeguards in place. I had barely paid attention back then. I trusted people too easily, especially family. Daniel stared at me. You knew? No, I said softly. I hoped I was wrong. He lowered his eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I looked at him and suddenly realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. The pain was still there. Of course it was. But anger had quietly left. In its place sat sadness. A deep sadness for both of us. Because money can change people. But sometimes it simply reveals things that were already growing quietly inside them. Small, selfish choices, small excuses, small moments of believing that love will always forgive everything. Daniel sat down beside me. He looked exhausted, older somehow. "When did I become this person?" he whispered. I looked at the guests dancing across the room. "I don't think it happens all at once." His eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him gently. "You didn't wake up one morning wanting to hurt me." He looked up. "But you hurt me anyway." The words were soft, not sharp, not angry, just true. Sometimes truth doesn't need volume. Sometimes truth only needs honesty. Daniel began crying quietly, and seeing him cry did something painful inside me. Because no matter how old your children become, part of you still remembers holding them when they were small. Part of you still wants to protect them. But another part finally learns something important. Love and boundaries must live together. Without boundaries, love slowly becomes sacrifice. And sacrifice, if given endlessly, can become permission. I touched his hand. "I love you, Daniel." He looked at me immediately. "But loving someone does not mean losing yourself." He closed his eyes and nodded. 6 months later, I moved into a small cottage on the edge of town, not because I had lost my home, because I wanted a different life. The house felt too large now, too full of echoes. My new place had a tiny porch and a small garden in the back. Nothing grand, just peace. I planted white roses beside the fence, lavender near the windows, little yellow flowers I could never remember the names of. Every morning I sat outside with tea in my hands and listened to birds singing in nearby trees. Slowly, life became gentle again. Daniel called often. Sometimes we talked for long periods, sometimes only for minutes. Trust returned slowly, as real trust always does. Not through promises, through actions, through time, through truth. One afternoon, my granddaughter came to visit and sat beside me in the garden. She smiled and asked, "Grandma, why do you love flowers so much?" I looked around at the quiet little garden and smiled, because now I finally understood. Flowers teach us something people often forget. You cannot force beautiful things to grow where respect does not exist. You can only care for what is healthy, and have enough courage to walk away from what is not. Then I closed my eyes, felt the sunlight on my face, and for the first time in a very long while, I felt home again.